It is an adaptation of a story from Stephen King's Night Shift called The Man Who Loved Flowers.
Mm-hmm.
It is a serial killer story, which seems to be. I always thought I was going to be a monster kind of horror movie maker when I was a kid. You know, that Freddy Krueger. But then, you know, when I actually started making movies, I started my first film as a serial killer film. And then that started winning a bunch of awards. After a lot of hate, I got a lot of hate from incels and the red pill community. Um, but then it started winning awards. And now I'm doing another serial killer story. I promise I'm not going to stay in the serial killer genre. It
Mm-hmm.
just seems to be working right now. And Stephen King is now letting me remake a short called The Man Who Loved Flowers.
So, can you talk about how you went about getting the rights to record that? Because because obviously you got to go through a lot of paperwork to get to
Nope.
that point. No.
Nope. You know what? I'm going to tell people the thing that has always worked for me is just an email.
And they
A
actually
lot of
responded.
Yeah, and they responded because the thing is, I'm going to tell you, I got my acting coach, which was Will Smith's acting coach before he passed. So it was like I was being trained by the man who was also training Will
Karita, you there? You faded out after Will Smith.
Smith at the same time.
Hello.
I pod him an email and I was like, "Hey, I don't have money, but I'm dope, son. I'm fire, yo!" Like, and he hit me back, and he was just like, "Okay, let's see it." You know, and then it's like after that, that has just been my mantra. I go out and I go and I find the way in. A lot of people don't try because they feel like, oh, there's all these hurdles and these gatekeepers. But I literally went to the bottom of Stephen King's website and found his email address, and I emailed his wife, who I didn't know was his managing his page at the time. Like, I don't know if she's his full-time manager, but Stephen King's wife, which I think her name is Tabitha, sent me an email back, and she was just like, "Yup, you're fired. Here goes the script." Like, I don't believe there's any future in fronting. I tell people the exact truth when I meet them. Like, hey, I could try to drop a whole bunch of names of people I've never met and don't really know. I could try to, seduce you with some grandiose ideas, or I could just be like, I'm just dope. I'm talented. I'm fire. I ain't got no money. Help me out. And that works because all of these people have been broke before. Stephen King has been broke before, but
Mm-hmm.
talented. I have, Will Smith's acting coach who helped me out. Rest in peace. He had been broke before. Everybody knows what it's like to be broke and talented that has, managed to make it. Like, I think that's a universal, like most people who have been successful have been broke before. Whether it's in college or just starting your career, it's almost a part of the ritual. The ritual of getting to where you need to go. You might be broke, you might be starving, but you might just be talented enough that might not be a permanent situation. So, I mean, she and him just gave me a chance and sent me the script.
So they wrote the script then, right? You didn't write it or anything
Oh
like
no, they
that.
wrote the story, and now I'm
Okay.
adapting the script to 2024 because
Oh,
the
okay.
story is actually set in 1960s, like when my mother was born. And other people have done this movie, and they always try to keep it set in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
That's not relatable. Like, I understand, like, it's a Stephen King story. I didn't change the core story, but I'm adapting it to what makes sense for 2024, what makes sense for 2023.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because part of keeping these stories alive is that they have to be relevant and understandable to somebody who is currently living in the world we currently live in.
Right. So can you talk about give us a brief summary of what that story is about? The Man Who Loves Flowers.
The Man Who Loves Flowers is about a man who has developed an unhealthy obsession. And in his mind, that unhealthy obsession, it's like it's similar to Groundhog's Day, but through the horror lens.
All right.
He is having a Groundhog's Day through the horror lens. I don't want to give too much of it away, but this is a man who is deeply disturbed and has developed an obsession, and every day is the same day.
Like literally the same day, just like in Groundhog's Day, right?
In his mind, it's literally the same day. In
Okay.
reality, it's a different day every day, but in his mind, he is reliving the same day every day. And it's like the world is changing around him, but for him, it's not. For him, he's always on the same mission every single day.
So so you spoke with the Kings, and they give you the green light to go ahead and adapt it. What happened after that?
Oh, life happened. I'm still working on it. My first film is starting to do way for my first film is only 8 minutes. I didn't expect it to be playing in Chicago or Ireland or all of these places that I didn't think that like my first 8 minute film ever would be going.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved to LA. And in between, I have been in K dramas. I've been in Russian TV shows. I've been on talk shows. Um, Currently went back to acting for a little while. Still working on the Stephen King film. I have a film that I'm doing before I get to the Stephen King film because I feel like I need a little bit more than one film underneath my belt to tackle Stephen King.
Yeah, because Stephen King films can be pretty involved, pretty intense.
Yeah, and I like love that they would trust me with something like as a beginner. But as a beginner, I would like to have at least one more movie under my belt before I start running into Stephen King territory.
Now, why do you now? Why is that? Why not just dive into this adaptation like from the very beginning? Like,
Because
why do
Stephen
you
King
feel?
fans will rip you apart if you do not do this correctly.
Mm,
Like
okay,
it is. I mean, I'm a Stephen King fan. I started reading Stephen King when I was about 5 years old.
yeah.
Yeah, my parents are horror movie fans. My grandparents are horror movie fans. I was raised on Stephen King, and
I'm
it's
more of
like
an
going.
I'm more of an Anne Rice kind of person, if I'm going to be honest with you.
I
I've
like
only
Anne
read
Rice too.
I've only read one Stephen King story, and I've only seen two Stephen King movies. But but for most of the '90s and early 2000s, like whenever I read a horror story, it was always Anne Rice. So like if you talked about Vampire Lestat, Vittorio the Vampire, the
Not the Devil. Like
Memnoch,
I've read all of those. I've read all
Mem-
of Anne Rice and I've read all of Stephen King.
yeah, Memnoch's one of my favorite novels, by the way. I absolutely love that book.
Not the Devil is a great book.
It is.
I
It is.
Lestat was great. Interview with the Vampire was good.
I don't
Memnoch
know.
the Devil. Hmm?
I mean, I feel like Interview of the Vampire is kind of overrated, and I lay the blame with the movie, because I saw the movie first, and then I read the book, and I was like,
No.
it's not for me. But Queen of the Damned, like I mean, I thought the movie was great, but I also enjoyed the novel version as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Even though there's many changes between that, but I feel like at the time they weren't gonna go into the territory of the many changes that were the many was it liberties that they took with Queen of the Damned movie version.
that's true.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, the book has all kinds of wild things in it. There's incest, there's all types of insanity in the actual book.
Well, I mean, remember they made that movie long before Game of Thrones came on the scene, and made incest kind of part. I guess you would say a more acceptable part of the narrative, right?
Oh, I'm pretty sure that those stepbrother movies with the washing machine girl saying I'm stuck helped that one.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure Pornhub helped that one out. Um, but I mean, like, it's not acceptable. But I mean, there's also scenes like when we talk about like there's these movements, right? So like, Game of Thrones was like, okay, incest. I guess we're dealing with that now. You know, that the Oedipus Ophelia type deal. What's it called? What is it?
Electra.
Walking, huh?
No, I was gonna say, you mentioned Oedipus and the Electron complexes.
Yeah, Electric, not Ophelia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like everything is coming from a source. Now, whether we have seen that source or dealt with that topic in recent times, well, that's a different story.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I mean, Interview with the Vampire, I really liked Interview with the Vampire, but I feel like the movie versus the book, it's just too different. It's just so different from each other that I don't almost even associate them.
What about the series that came out recently?
I haven't seen the series yet. I did audition for it, and they were like, "Come back when you're skinny," and I was like, "Well, I'll see you in 30 pounds, y'all."
Holy shit, they actually said that to you?
Oh yeah, no. When you're an actor, they don't hesitate to tell you that you're too big for something. They'll tell you to your face. Your ears too big, your nose are too small, your lips are too big, your lips are too small, your head is too funny shaped.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like the way your arms look. We like the way your arms look. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, like if you don't have a thick skin, Hollywood in Los Angeles is not for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to be tougher than nails to be here.
Either that or you need to have a lot of money and the number of a good plastic surgeon, you know?
I mean, they got that too. You still got to be tough.
Yeah, true.
Even when you got that, you still got to be tough because people are still going to talk about it. Um, and this is a place where like you get reprimanded for getting older, which is wild. But we won't talk about that. Like there's a lot of vampires in Los Angeles. There's a lot of
Figuratively.
vampires to interview here.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to the Stephen King thing.
Mm-hmm.
So so you said that basically you wanted to get a few films under your belt before you actually tackled this adaptation, and it was just due to the fact that Stephen King's fans are very ardent and zealous in their appreciation of adaptations. How are you able to talk about how far you've gotten in that process since securing the rights from the Kings?
Well, there's been a lot of changes since that happened. Like AI in the film industry, for one,
Yeah,
that's going to be real helpful. Like I know a lot of people are scared of it. And if you're a big company, then if you work for a big company like Paramount or Universal, you should be terrified. If you are a small independent filmmaker, then you should be rejoicing and dancing in the streets.
so actually, it was actually interesting you mentioned that because a few months ago, I actually did an interview with a writer about the rise of AI in the filmmaking process. So, do you think and you mentioned a very interesting point right there. Can you talk about why the big studios should be afraid, but not the little studios?
Because I can shoot
If
a
that's what
drone
you're able to
shot.
say.
Yeah. Because for me as a small independent person, it costs a lot to hire that kind of crew
Hmm.
when it comes to making an actual film, right? It's crew, and then you got to talk to people, and then you got to try to get your vision, and you also have to do it within a budget and how much money. And now with AI, like I recently just did some AI shots for my second film. I'm not doing the whole film in AI, it's just shots I couldn't normally get.
Right, right.
I was able to say, I want a drone shot of a white Nissan driving down a deserted road. And 30 seconds later, it existed. I want to say, okay, I don't have time to sit and do a intro piece by piece. Give me an intro where there's stars moving over the water around a mountain. These are all on my Instagram and social media. I'm telling you things I actually did.
Yeah.
And in 30 seconds, I had an intro. For me as a small filmmaker, this is a godsend, right? But let's say you are Universal Studios. Money is nothing. Well, money is still something, but you're employing 20 stunt workers. You're employing hundreds and hundreds of people. And you're able, and then now you can do whatever it is you wanted that movie to look like in 30 seconds. That means a lot of people lose their livelihoods. You know, it means a lot of people no longer work in film. It means the end of traditional filmmaking,
Right,
because we
right.
know that Universal and Paramount don't, they're not like, they make family films. They are not family orientated. They will get rid of you in a heartbeat. You know, like those companies are not loyal to us. They are loyal to themselves. Which means, you know, as this takes hold, you know, a lot of people are like, "Oh, we shouldn't be scared of AI." Yes, if you're working for Paramount or Universal, yes, you should. You should be absolutely terrified, because your livelihood and the way in which we operate and make film for the last 150 years is now definitively changed. So now I can make a movie that looks just as good as Universal Studios by myself. That means Universal Studios can hire, you know, 5 people to sit at a computer, or you know, or just a writer. A really good writer could write a whole movie now, and the AI will bring it to life. That significantly takes down crews that were in the thousands, or hundreds and thousands of people. That takes that down to 3 people in a room.
Hmm.
You know, maybe 2 people. And like for me, it's, you know, at this point, it's 1 person. And I'm able to do the same quality of work that you see on TV, that you see in a Paramount film. So for me, as a small independent filmmaker, this came right at a time to like kind of, you know, as I adapt the Stephen King story into, you know, 2024, AI is kind of helping me bridge that gap also. And this will be the first Stephen King film that utilizes AI.
Now, is that something that they're aware of, the Kings?
I should probably, you know what? I should probably let them be aware of that. But
Okay.
they kind of gave me the rights to just kind of make what I want.
Yeah, having creative liberty to adapt that. So let me ask you this, because when I spoke with Rodney, I know the big sticking point was was the usage of talent, because and you probably remember this too. There was this huge legal kerfuffle between Scarlett Johansson about a company using her voice as a template for for an AI, I guess like an AI voice, and she went to court against them. Do you sort of do you sort of see this as a potential battleground between talent and studios over the use of AI or illegal use of AI?
Oh, it's going to be that way for them. For me, I don't have that problem, because, you know, I make monsters. Monsters don't exist, so they won't be monsters won't be suing me for anything with it. I use my AI to make monsters and shots I couldn't normally get, that would normally put, you know, an actor or a guy in a suit in danger.
But what about
But
the vocal talent though? Like suppose because even if you are just using AI to create these characters, don't you? I mean, if you had to like have a speaking character, wouldn't you still have to rely on vocal talent to some degree to kind of make the work pop out?
I mean, for me personally, I'm not doing the whole film in AI. I am doing it because AI, you can tell AI what kind of camera you're using, and it will mimic what your camera looks like.
Hmm.
So if I tell AI I'm using a red or a black magic and it's this model and this make, it will match my footage that I'm shooting in real life to the footage that it's creating in AI.
Yeah, for continuity. Yeah, yeah.
For continuity, yeah, I don't want, you know, for me, it's like I'm bridging 2 worlds together. For bigger companies like Paramount and Universal, yeah, they're going to have a huge fight over that. But most of the time, Universal is just going to pay them off. Or Paramount Films, they're going to give those people their money. The only thing is that it changes the dynamic of how do you negotiate that.
Yeah, because they're gonna have to have a clause in the contract, going forward, saying, the studio reserves the right to use your image or vocal talents um, for this project here using AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of and as much as you want to sympathize with the actors because their voice and their image is their livelihood, at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, from a practical point of view, it's like, well, what's the red line? Where do we say no? We're not going to sign this contract because realistically speaking, I mean, if you're an actor and you want the work, you're gonna you're gonna have to sign that that dotted line that's going to allow the studios to do whatever they want with your face and your voice to promote or make that project.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a good is like, somebody as big as Scarlett Johansson, they probably have a lawyer that will be like, okay, well, I want royalties from that.
Yeah,
But lesser known actors that aren't Scarlett Johansson, like I'm not Scarlett Johansson, I'm just an actor.
yeah.
Um, they probably won't have that option. And I'm gonna be real with you. I've already started working with Google and I've let them use my image already.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Like Google has already started hiring people to help the AI begin to mimic and move and talk and walk. And I've already signed it away. I was like, I'm already here. Let's do it.
Hmm.
I mean, other people though are kind of, they have their reservations, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with their reservations. I don't have those reservations though. Um, but I mean, going forward for some people, they're gonna have to look at that and go, okay, is this something that I'm comfortable with? Because when you also sign those over, that also means that they can create things that you might not agree with your image when you sign off on that. I'm pretty sure Scarlett Johansson doesn't want them to do a nude scene with an AI character depicting her,
All right.
but they just might. Because once you sign off to these bigger companies, they kind of make sure, they try to figure out ways that they can get around whatever it is that you said so they can get what they want.
And it,
I'm an
and
independent film girly. Huh?
yeah, no, and I was gonna say, like, I mean, technically, it wouldn't be illegal because they did sign the contract, and it did. Even if it doesn't state specifically, it'll be worded in such a way that it would be allowed. You know.
Mm-hmm. And for me, like, I mean, as an independent filmmaker, um, there are things that probably, you know, maybe I'll get in a movie and hit it big. Who knows? But as an independent filmmaker at this moment in time, there's a lot of things about AI that I will probably, you know, I do, well, not probably never, but I do not have to deal with that bigger companies will have to deal with, and the people who work for bigger companies have to deal with.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why Stephen King let me use it, because I like being independent. I like being an independent filmmaker. I like living kind of outside of the rules. You get to be a lot more edgy. You get to be a lot more out there. Like imagine what's his name? John Waters. When they tried to make John Waters like a household name, it didn't work as well as when he was doing, the crazy band like psycho films. I mean, I did like Crybaby. Crybaby was a great film, but compared to everything he had did before that, it was cleaned up.
Karita, can you hear me? You kind of dropped off. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. You mentioned Crybaby, and then you kind of faded out after that.
Oh, I said because Crybaby was way more homogenized for like, a more I would say regular viewing
It
audience.
was mainstream, basically, right?
Yeah, it was mainstream. And for
Okay.
me, I think for me as an independent filmmaker, I can go balls to the wall. There's like, like I can go as far as like Cannibal Holocaust and then bring it down from there. As an independent filmmaker, I think I can do the things with Stephen King's films that, studios would try to play down or would just take out.
It's a license to be honest, basically.
Yeah. I mean, there are certain things that I'm glad, like with Stephen King's It, I'm really glad they took out the kid orgy. That part I'm really happy is no longer there.
Right,
But when I
right.
was a kid, I skipped it even, like, because when it started getting weird as a kid, I didn't necessarily understand. I was like, "What is this?" And then I was like, "Yep, I'm not. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna skip those pages. I'm good. I'm good." And as an adult, I still skip those pages because now it's even weirder to me. Like reading that when I was 8, I was just like, "What is this?" And now that I'm like way older than 8, I'm just like, "Yeah, I'm glad. You know what? That you didn't really need that in the movie. You're right. You're right. I'm very
Yeah,
happy."
it didn't add anything to the story at all. It was just there for the sake of being weird, right?
Yeah, it was the sake of being weird. And I mean, if that's how he felt at the time, I get it. He said he did a lot of blow at the time. I understand. Um, he
I
said
mean,
it was
hey,
the
I mean,
80s.
hey, it'll make you do a lot of weird things, man. I mean,
Yeah, he said it was the 80s and he did a lot of drugs. And I was like, you know what? I believe it. Especially when you're like, coming from the background he had to being all of a sudden like money everywhere, money raining down on you, back
yeah,
in the
yeah,
80s.
yeah.
Um, but I mean, I'm ready for that though. When the money starts raining down on me, like the awards are nice. I would like the money now, but I feel like doing independent films is a license to be honest. Um, I mean, I was raised with the independent film channel, and
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I remember seeing that a lot way back in the day.
yeah, way back in the day, like,
You're taking me down memory lane there, Karita.
oh yeah, well, I mean, it was on in the 2000s up until like the mid 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And then they
Mm-hmm.
became the Sundance Film Festival, and all their energy kind of pushes into that.
It lost. I mean, once it happened, it kind of lost its potency, and then you're like, well, it's just another channel now. It's no longer this outlet for for subversive independent talent. Now it's just another channel that you can opt in or opt out of. You know.
Yeah, well, I think also it's because the studios started posing themselves as independent studios. Like they started posing themselves as independent studios when the whole time it was just like a subsidiary of, if you looked at who was doing what, you'd be like, oh, this is what? That's a subsidiary of Universal. Oh, wait, I thought that was independent. This is a subsidiary of NBC. Like
Yeah,
it went from
it's bait and switch. Basically, that's what it was.
yeah, because we started out with subversive, like the subversive movies like Tangerine, La Vie en Rose, like, or there's a lot of like really great 2000s, early 2000s and late 90s movies, or even 90s movies that were outside of the mainstream that were just great, like Buffalo 66. There's so many great movies that happened, or even Cowgirls, Get the Blues, stuff like that. There were so many great films from that decade. And then you can see the definitive line, like when all of a sudden it was like all these studios were just like, oh, okay, you guys like that now? Okay, we're that too. Like, you see us, we're independent. We'll just not put our name on it. And
But I mean,
it
but I mean, it kind of goes back to what I mentioned before about independent films being or filmmaking is giving you a license to be honest, because when they pulled that stunt, it was it was the beginning of the end, because now it was it was less of being honest and just more being same old, i.e., being dishonest as opposed to being honest. Because once they did that bait and switch, like when you watch some of those films, it was like, wait, this looks oddly familiar, and the next film you would watch is like, okay, that looks really familiar, and then and then you sort of start putting two and two together. You're like, well, I've seen this before, and then well, way back in the day when you used to get movie screenings and movie reviews in newspapers, and you would look at it, you're like, holy shit, that's why it's so familiar, because someone had did a review of it in the newspaper for a different film. Um,
Yeah, because it's like we're seeing it started being a lot of things. It was like the same old stories, except they would add a girl with a nose ring and purple hair dye.
yeah, exactly.
Like they invented the manic pixie dream girl. That was like those were just regular people living their lives in independent films before them. They invented these like little niches of people, and then like I mean, there's some movies that are amazing and great, but you can kind of see them you see who they're pandering to. like those of us who stayed outside of the independent film, who stayed outside in the independent film area, you know, it's like it's hard for me to come into the mainstream, like when it comes to watching films. I still watch films from usually other countries because I feel like they get to have a lot more license in where they can go.
The narrative, the way they tell these stories is also very different because they're coming from a completely different frame of reference from ours. Well, at least in the Anglo speaking world, anyway.
Well,
But
true.
what I was also going to say too was that just going back to what you were saying about the manic pixie archetype, what I find so tragic about that is that when you first saw that those characters in indie films way back in the day, you're like, well, that could be anybody. That could be my next door neighbor. That could be the person I see at school. That could be the person
Mhm.
who lives down the street. But
Or
then
that's
what?
me. I was
Yeah,
goth. I was goth, and when I was a teenager, I'm
yeah.
still kind of goth, but like I can't be as full out goth because I have to work.
Well, what I was also going to add too is the fact that once the major studios started to get their hands into it, it ceased to it ceased to being something that was very familiar. It started becoming more and more of a fetish, right? They started taking these characters and fetishizing them to sort of you know find sort of like this underhanded way of trying to give them sex appeal, right? So rather than being like this tragic character who you felt very very deep empathy for and you could sort of feel for where they're coming from, now it's like they're just a shell for which you can project all of your sexual and erotic fantasies, and they're devoid of any humanity or of any soul for that matter.
Hmm. All of a sudden, it's Natalie Portman in a pink wig.
Oh, we're talking about what was that movie, V for Vendetta?
No, I
Because
mean she doesn't have the pink wig in V for Vendetta. She has it in Closer, which is
okay,
uh, which is Julia Roberts. I can't remember any of the guys in it though. Julia Roberts. What's his name? Oh, I can't remember. He used to be what he was. Oh my god, I can't remember the other guy's name. But it's like Julia Roberts, Natalie Portman, a couple other actresses, and it was just like, oh well, now that whole manic pixie dream girl is just Natalie Portman in a pink wig. Awesome. Or Kate Winslet with blue hair.
oh, Clive Owen.
Yeah. Okay, Clive Owen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There's just like it just became okay. Now these are just versions of Hollywood starlets with nose rings.
But they've been
You know.
sexualized. That's the thing, because
Yep.
now that you've seen it, it's like they're. I mean, these aren't people that are people. Really, they're just sex objects. They're, it's just become another cog in the in the major studio machine. But I
Yeah,
I
because
want to add,
Natalie Portman's alt girl. The first time you see her, she's a stripper.
yeah.
The opening scene is Natalie Portman in a pink wig being an alt girl as a stripper.
I
So
mean, hey, it just drives home that point,
yeah,
really.
it just drives home your point. You're absolutely right. It drives home the point where I was just like, but I liked it when it was the girl that was down the street or me, or I preferred that because it made the films better. You know, like I love Donnie Darko, but Donnie Darko was kind of that bridge when they started being like, we're gonna start making these look way more like independent films. You're just not gonna notice. you know,
Yeah.
like the alt person, and then I think it hit its peak. I think it hit its absolute peak with Scott Pilgrim. I'm not gonna talk shit about Scott Pilgrim. I'm saying I like the way the movie is filmed, but Scott Pilgrim is a dirtbag. The main character is a dirtbag, and any guy I've ever met that idolized Scott Pilgrim was also a dirtbag.
So yeah, Scott Pilgrim was one of those movies where it was just basically a huge millennial fest of of all these big and up and coming stars just trying their best to look indie and trying to tap into that hipster mentality, but you kind of knew it was a fake kind of hipsterism, if that makes any sense.
No, it
Because
makes absolute sense. It
yeah,
makes absolute sense. Like it was more of a film that was like, oh, this is a really cool concept, and we think millennials will like it. Let's put everybody that like it, that we think will become something in the future, and a lot of them did. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of them went on to Marvel. There's Miss Marvels in there.
It's kind
Um,
of it kind of reminds me of what they did with Geeks and Freaks way back in the '90s, if you think about it, because they took a lot of big Gen X stars and kind of gave them that platform to sort of be like these weird kooky characters, but at the same time you knew it was artificial because it was being financed by a major studio, and you kind of get the same sentiment with Scott Pilgrim, except it's just with a different generation with with a much
yeah,
bigger budget, as it were. Uh,
yeah. Freaks and
I
Geeks was too early for me though. Like I was a baby when that came out.
mm,
But like I'm still trying to catch up on all the other stuff I missed before that. Like in that time period. But I was there for Scott Pilgrim, and I like the way Scott Pilgrim looked as like a visual aesthetic. But Scott Pilgrim as the character, trying his best to be indie, I was just like, it, it. I could have dealt without that.
it was such a weird movie, and then when they did that series on Netflix, I just sat there and scratched my head, and I was like, it wasn't
Yeah,
even good. It wasn't even good way back then. Like, why are you bothering with it now? Like, I mean, that
I'm gonna
ship
say this.
sailed.
I'm gonna say I thought the movie was. I thought the movie was good. It was just a little bit what's it called? Just cliche at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I was part of that wave way back in 2014. 10 years, god damn, can't believe 10 years ago for me. But I remember I was like fresh out of school, and
Mm-hmm.
you know and and I was watching it, and the way they were pitching it was like, this is like one of the movies that if you're a millennial you'll love it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a millennial, but I do not like this at all.
I
um
did not care for Scott, but I liked everything else around Scott. I did not
yeah.
care for the main character. But I think you're supposed to not like him because when you read the books, he's kind of a douchebag. And he's kind of an unapologetic douchebag. I think because it's Michael Cera, they put this empathetic character in there because it's Michael Cera and he looks like you should be empathetic for him.
Yeah.
Um, but Scott himself is a douchebag. He's just as bad as any of the other people he's fighting. He's as bad as all the seven X's. In fact, he's worse because Knives is not old enough to be dating him. You know, he's kind of a pervert.
I mean, it's also got a bit of a stalker quality to him too, if you think about it.
Yeah. Well, we're just gonna sit here and rag on Scott Pilgrim. Like my issue was is as soon as they had the situation with Knives, I was
Mhm.
just highly annoyed. But I'm always highly annoyed when I see, like, I hate to say it, when I see beautiful, beautiful Asian women with the most terrible, terrible looking white boys. I do not care. It just hurts my stomach where I'm just like, but you're 10 times that guy. That was what got on my nerves when it was like Knives. I was like, Knives is a better person than Scott Pilgrim will ever be. And she's over here basically laying herself down in the middle of the road for an old pervert weirdo that should not be talking to a high schooler.
Yeah, yeah. Oh god, I mean, we'll have to do an episode where we basically just rip on Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I mean, that's just one of those movies we could probably like, you know, plan for later on down the road. Um, so so I want to go back to the Stephen King adaptation. I know I keep saying that, but it's just one of those things that fascinates me. So
Oh no, we need to get back to it. That's what we came here for.
yeah,
It's just,
so
podcasts are about rambling a little bit.
I mean, hey, I mean, it makes it all interesting, right? It makes it more organic, really.
Hmm.
So where are you right now in the process? Have you started casting, or have you mainly just started just playing shots or pre-production? Where are you at this point?
I started playing shots already. Right now, it's just casting. I'm looking for cast members. You know what? It's been hard to find what's it called, the main person,
Hmm.
because I really don't like with my last film. I don't like stereotypical serial killers. I don't like the idea of casting the same kind of, serial killers right now are always, just to put it, it's like, I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but it's always like psychotic white men with mommy issues now. And I'm like, well, why
Like, so
can't
so
you
basically
have,
the Norman Bates kind of kind of vibe, right?
Yeah, because even Longlegs is another white dude killing people. Um, what is the one movie where he takes the girl into the underground shed and kills her? Uh, Lovely Bones. Um, and when you look at all the major monsters, they're all just white dudes. Michael Myers is just a white dude. Like, you know what I mean? Freddy Krueger is a burnt white dude. And like,
Jason Voorhees is a white dude also.
yeah, all of them are. I mean, the only one we got was like Candyman, and that's one out of how many like Leatherface. When we think of all the major monsters, werewolves, vampires, they're all the same dude, same kind of dude. So I think for this one, I want to explore different kinds of faces as killers. Like I personally would love to hire an Asian dude to play the serial killer because it's something I've never seen. I've
I think
never seen in
well, I
American
think
cinema.
what I was gonna say too, because if you think about it, I mean, there have been some instances of people of color perpetrating these horrible crimes. Obviously, the biggest one that comes to mind is the Virginia Tech shooting from like
Mm-hmm,
20 years ago, and then you've got Elliot Rodger, who committed the mass murders in Isla Vista.
mm-hmm,
He's part Asian as well. So and what's also interesting too is the fact that within Asian culture, there's this sort of unspoken rule of you need to be stoic, you need to kind of bury your emotions. um and just speaking personally for myself, I mean, I grew up in a household where it was kind of frowned upon for you to kind of show any emotion or cry. You just took your feelings and you stuffed it in there and you just got on with it. It's kind of like with that it's kind of like with the post with that World War II and post-war Britain, that famous slogan, keep calm and carry on, that stiff upper lip. That's the kind of
mm-hmm.
mentality that you have. But what you also have to appreciate is the fact that over the past 50 years or so, there's been a lot of trauma within that part of the world, right? I
Yeah,
mean, obviously you've got you had the Japanese occupations of most of Asia during World War II, but then you've also had the civil wars that occurred, from the 1950s all the way up until the 1980s. So there's that that level of trauma that that generations are still trying to come to grips with, because even if the generation that lived through it has sort of found a way to kind of make peace with it, they've sort of passed that trauma on to the younger generation. And now they're trying to find a way to figure it out, even though they haven't directly experienced it. It still affects them as much as it did their parents and grandparents. Um,
true. Generational trauma is real. I think also for me, I want to hire um an Asian man to play the killer, because I noticed that like one of my favorite things is like flipping the idea. I noticed that
yeah,
in movies when they're Asian men, they're neutered. They neuter them. Like they take away their sexuality. They
they also
take
don't
away
have
their
any.
ability to be angry. They
Sorry,
take
I'm
away
sorry to interrupt, but they also don't have any beards. Like, what the hell's up with that?
yeah, no body hair also. But that's a different story. Nobody gets to have body hair in movies unless like unless you're like in the woods and you've left society. Nobody gets beards. Um, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and they're hairless and they're feminine, and society, movies, and media like have neuter them. They make them take away all the masculinity. They take away any feelings that isn't in line with being a model minority. Like I noticed that in movies, when there's Asian men, they make them, much like they do to any other person of color. But with Asian men, they will exotify the women and then neuter the men. Like take away their ability to feel rage, take away their ability to be sexual. And if they are sexual, it's in a clownish, cartoonish way.
That's like a Zen. It's like if Ken decided to be Zen, you know, in a weird
Yeah.
sort of way.
Or just like the butt of the joke.
Mm-hmm.
You get either your Mr. freaking Mr. Miyagi, which is still neutered. He's still an unsexual character. or
Well,
you get
I mean, with characters like that, I mean, you also kind of take away the interesting parts that make them human. You kind of reduce
yeah,
them to a stereotype. You sort of turn them into this sort of wise figure,
it's a
but
walking
that's
fortune
it.
cookie.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically,
So,
they're fortune cookies. Basically, it's fortune cookies with faces. And for me, that's upsetting in general. Like that's just upsetting to me. So I like the idea of taking this character and making it something that American audiences isn't aren't necessarily used to, because we can't live in, I watch true crime stories from all around the world. There are definitely Japanese serial killers. There's definitely Korean killers. There's definitely killers in Africa. There's definitely killers in Australia. There
mhm.
are people who are
You dropped off, Karita.
let me see. Are we back? Are you there?
Yeah. So the last thing I heard was there are killers in Africa.
Oh, there's killers everywhere, right? And people fail to realize that the role of the villain is also still a position of power. In fact, it's one of the most powerful positions, to be able to offer an opposition to this idea of this hero savior that's on the same level as the hero savior,
Hmm.
but this movie has no savior. The killer is the most powerful position in the film. And for me, I want to offer something different. When my audiences sit down, I don't want them to think, oh well, I'm gonna see another stereotypical film about a white guy killing people. Yay. I'm tired of it. We've done that. We've done it. We've seen it. It's been done. It is done in every freaking movie every freaking day. I'm ready to start seeing, Star Wars has the new Star Wars series, which the fans absolutely hate, but they'll love it eventually, is kind of having, now with their Asian male character, they're having they're pushing that kind of boundary. And I want to be able to push that boundary too. My last film was about a black female serial killer, and people lost their minds about it. I get hate mail. Incels were fighting in the theater. And for me, I just want to offer a different perspective. And I think because of the way this story is set up, having, that the stereotype of the neutered, sweet Asian male that only lives to be a model minority, I think that stereotype will play real well into what I'm going to do with this movie.
I was gonna say, I mean, if you do hire an Asian actor, make sure they have a beard, um, because my
We
mom
will
always
try. I'm
because
scared of beards, though. I'm gonna be real. Like, I'm not anti beards because of movies. I'm scared of beards, like because I don't like it when I can't see people's faces. But
well,
maybe that's why I should use a beard then.
that's the reason why my mom hates me having a beard because she's like, you look like a rapist. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well,
You don't.
she's like, back in Cambodia, men don't have beards because if they did, you would be, people would think you're a rapist and you probably might get picked up by the police and spend a night in jail. And I'm like, oh, okay, well,
Oh, what you
this
don't?
is America.
This is America, and you definitely don't look like one, or I don't even know what they're supposed to look like. That's the thing. They have no face. They're just person that does evil things, and they all look different. It's the
Mhm.
same demon, different bodies. Um,
Another thing too, and this is just me, just tossing some ideas out here. I think I think what would make it even more potent is the fact that because like I mentioned earlier about generational trauma. I mean, I think if it's I think if this serial killer had to deal with generational trauma and they were resorting to violence as a way to cope with it, I think that would make it rather more potent. Because my dad because my dad back in the 70s, he was in the military, way back in the day. And when I was growing up, all I remember was him just like lying there on the couch, just like passed out, soused to the gills, and he's got surrounded by like tall boys and 40s and everything. And and the man was just horrible to live with because he was always drunk, he was always belligerent. And at that time I was like, yeah, this guy just can't keep it together. But over the past few years, I've come to I still haven't forgiven him for the way he behaved, but you know, but in context of what he had to go through way back then, I'm like, you know what, I may not agree, but I can understand where he's coming from. I mean, it's
Yeah, you
obviously,
don't have to
I
agree
mean,
with his actions.
obviously, it's no excuse to be, to resort to violence to, to do
Mhm.
what you do, or to basically drink yourself to an early grave. But I can understand, given what you've seen and what you were forced to do, that I could see why you would do that, because it's just one of those things where this is how you cope. And obviously, going to a therapist and we're trying to talk it out is a bit effeminate. So what you do, right, is you just stuff it down, and as they say, you stuff it down with some brown, and that's what he did.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel it. I'm an avid weed smoker for a reason.
Hmm.
I got PTSD. It just makes life easy.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get it. I mean, I still can work with through mine though, but I get it. I absolutely get it. Um, I think a little bit of this character is just this the main character is he just hasn't he's a person that he's obsessed in his mind. He is the owner of this person. And he's trying to cope with the things that he's done, so every night he brings this person. No, it's not the actual person in his mind. He brings this image of this person back to life, and he repeats the same thing every night.
Hmm.
And like in his mind, I think when he sets out for the day, he thinks, oh, it's going to be different today, and it's never different. In fact, it's always, oh, hold on. Okay, my laptop is saying it's about to die.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and wrap it up then, just so you can get that taken care of. But I would definitely love to have you come back in. Well, now I want to have you come back to riff on Scott Pilgrim, because you've planted that seed in my head, and I'm taking the podcast in all sorts of directions, and one of them is diving into movies more in depth. We already did a Seinfeld discussion.
Oh
Um,
man, Scott Pilgrim fans though are fanatical. They'll rip your podcast apart, but that's what we're here for.
I
We're here
look,
for to start discussions. Welcome.
look. I mean, so far the 2 years this podcast has been in operation, we've barely gotten any comments or any views. So at this point, if the haters come out of the woodworks and start, spamming us, I'm okay with it, because any attention's good attention. You know what I
Well, I
mean?
made a post about it today, and some haters started spamming. Maybe you know what? We're gonna talk because, like, I do run a marketing company, and
Oh,
well, part of hate when you run a podcast, like the good people will find you, and the bad people need to find you too. It's about dealing with the fact that people are going to call you all kinds of names. They're going to wish you dead. They're going to do all kinds of stuff. And then being like, yeah, well, I'm still going to
uh,
keep doing what I'm doing.
I mean, 10 years ago, I probably would have been like, "Oh well, if you say so." But now it's like, I'm at a point in my life where I just don't care. Whatever. I
You
mean,
can't give a shit. I put myself through exposure therapy where I did a rage bait campaign and had 3,000 people calling me names, fat, ugly, all that. And I still get stragglers even today that are still like, well, I saw that thing, and I'm like, yeah, and thanks for the free engagement, ho. um when it first happens, it's very shocking, and you're like, oh my god. And now I'm like a year away from that, and I'm just like, oh, you guys are still on that. Thanks for the money. Like, in fact, I made a video they boosted my algorithm to the point where I made money enough to go get my teeth whitened. So I filmed that and thanked them in the comments. And they're still mad at me. They're like, well, that one guy who made a video about you, he really cooked you. And I was like, yes, because there's no way that I just had you engage on a post that didn't have any engagement on it.
it's like those people who buy those albums to burn, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm definitely going to show this artist, yeah, what we think of their music." It's like, well, you still went to the store and you still bought their album, so in the end, they're the winner because you actually gave them money.
I
Um,
still got
in the
paid,
end,
bro.
yeah,
I still
exactly,
got
exactly.
paid. But yeah, you know what? We could talk more about like some marketing and all that because, like, yo, I am the queen of controversy. Like, so much that I had to retire. I just needed a break. My brain was like, A lot was going on at the time. A lot. Like I had just did a billboard in Times Square as a model because I still do modeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a bunch of crazies I had one crazy try to break in my house. My ex broke up with me because he was really my ex broke up with me because he was upset that I was on the billboard. And I was like, oh well, fuck you, dude. And he came and broke up my car. It was just like I was going through so much on top of having like, one of the most controversial shows on like the internet. But if you need help, believe me, me in the Despicable Me labs, we have quite a few things we could do without making your morals be in question. Because I always stay moral in what I do. Now, if
Yeah.
you're mad when I make the moral choice and you're so upset that you're gonna just boost my algorithm, well then, who's to stop you?
Well, I am looking forward to that to that discussion that I'm going to be having next month about Julius Caesar, because the guy who's coming on, he says he's very passionate about his politics, and he even said, if this is something you want to do, I mean, we'll do it. And I'm like, you know what, bring it on, like
Do it. Just be
let's do it.
prepared.
Yeah,
Make
I
sure
mean,
that all your addresses are not they cannot get your addresses online before you do it.
yeah,
Make sure you are not findable. Make sure all your parents and family accounts are not public. Like before you do this part of the controversy, there's like things you got to put in place. Like I made sure my mom's Instagram account was private.
mm-hmm.
I made sure that you can't find my address. I moved so much anyway, so it's not like anybody's gonna find my address anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right now I'm on the road. Right now I am a traveling actress. I'm never in my apartment long enough to even have an apartment, so I'm probably just gonna go on the road full time. But yeah, like just make sure you got everything battened down, and then like make sure that you know how to control and restrict the flow of comments. Other than that, go for it. It was some easy money.
Yep.
Easy money.
Mm-hmm.
In 2024, it's easy to upset people. Just exist.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you're starting to see a pushback on that oversensitivity, though, because
I
like,
mean, but then that's another fight, and that makes us money still.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's
I
more
kind of,
people being sensitive about
I kind of defer. I kind of like that interview that Bill Burr did with Bill Maher.
Oh
Because I was like,
wow, that was a great interview. A great interview.
because as soon as I saw that, I was like, you know what, good on him. I totally agree with it with what he's saying, because it's like, you know what, at the end of the day, it's like you just got to cut all the BS out and just go with that.
Yeah, like
Don't try.
like when he said that like you're not the best person to give relationship advice. He's right.
Yeah.
Fuck Bill Maher though. I used to like Bill Maher. Bill Maher could suck a dick. He got one of my friends fired from her job. She's a young Japanese woman, and he got her fired from her job because she said she didn't want to sleep with him because he's old enough to be her grandpa. She's 22.
I forget he's like over, like either he's at 70 or he's over 70 at this point.
Like he's old as hell.
Yeah.
And she's like 21 or 22. He got her fired in Los Angeles for turning him down.
God damn.
So Bill Maher's creepy ass. I'm glad that Bill Burr gave it to him.
Yeah.
Bill Burr kept his foot on Bill Maher's neck, and I love everything about that.
Because because I think that was like the first interview where basically he kind of just like, he kind of let Bill Maher have both barrels of it. And it's like, yeah, I'm calling you out on your bullshit, basically.
Oh, Bill Burr is amazing. He calls everybody on his bullshit. That's like the best part of his comedy.
But
like,
I think what he did on Bill Maher's podcast was like equally rich, because it was one of those things where where Bill Maher, he never really had a guest on who kind of gave it to him straight. They were all kind of sycophants in a way, right? But here, like, Bill Burr's like, yeah, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid, man. Like, yeah, you're full of horse shit. But yeah, I just absolutely love that interview. But Karita, like I said, I mean, I would really love to have you come back on. I'd really, really want you to come back on soon for Myth, Magic, and Movies, because I feel like there are a ton of topics we can go through on here. Did I email you that list? Because if not, I could send it to you again, because there's like a ton of stuff we could talk about.